Hello. Okay, I'm Kelly Evans. I write the Ahead of the Tape column for the Wall Street Journal. It's sort of a daily look at what's going on in the economy and stock market. So my nickname at work is Debbie Downer lately. But I guess that can't be helped. I also do if you haven't downloaded, by the way, WSJ Live, I highly recommend that you do so right now. It's part of what I also do at the Journal, which is to host a daily show, a morning show called The News Hub. It's half an hour. It's live at 8:30 in the morning on the website. And if you have this app, you can kind of watch it live, or if you have an internet-enabled TV. So we're doing lots of exciting things. We're talking about e-commerce on this panel, and I think the Journal is a good example of kind of an old industry that's quickly moved into e-commerce and sort of the future there. In any case, to my right here, I have the CEOs of 3 incredibly successful e-commerce companies and a guy who knows more about the future of commerce in Asia and in China than probably anyone on the planet. So without further delay, let's get right to it. I'd like to begin, I think, by asking, we were discussing a little bit about this backstage. The 3 companies here, Ideeli, Gilt, Groupe, and Chegg, all represent very successful industries in the US. We're talking about fast fashion for Gilt, a little bit of the more luxury element of that group. And then we're also talking about Chegg, which does online textbook rentals. And so the question, I think, for the 3 of you, and I think we'll start with Kevin here, because you are pretty successful in Japan already, so you maybe have the most overseas exposure. But what is the future of e-commerce for Gilt Groupe for you right now? Where are your opportunities? Where do you expand overseas?
So for Gilt, when we look at it, it's a little bit different than, I ran DoubleClick for a long time, and their international was fundamental to the strategy, because when we went to a new market, we had a product that already worked, and so we had an enormous cost advantage over local partners, and we had a product advantage because the player, the Procter & Gamble in New York, wanted to use the same system in Paris. So we had a product and cost advantage. In our business now, which was one of the reasons that the flash sales companies in general have not been as aggressive internationally, is that we don't have those advantages. You almost start from scratch, which meant that we were protected from other players coming into the market who had already started, but we really have to have a new warehouse, have to have a new mailing list. So the only reason I went to Japan aggressively in the beginning is that there was one place where there was no one doing it, big market, able to go early on, and we become the leader there. So what we're doing internationally then is, in the short term, is we'll start shipping internationally, which we haven't done to date. So November 1st, we'll ship to 100 plus countries. We'll start to sell some of our merchandise to other players and start to partner in other countries where we'll take, if we're making or having made 1,000 of these suits, we may make 5,000 of them and then partner with other companies to do that. Longer term, we may end up acquiring or setting up companies in other countries, but we haven't done that yet.
All right, Dan.
Well, we've been almost exclusive to the U.S. up to this point. We just acquired a company called Zinch, which has a large international presence in Asia, particularly in China, and it helps Chinese kids get connected to U.S. colleges to get in. I've managed a lot of global companies in the past, particularly with Yahoo, which was in 26 different countries, and my experience has been on the international front. You really do need to acquire your way in. It's hard for me to see any U.S. company, particularly in Asia, doing well on its own without buying in. But if you look at all the successful ones, whether it was Amazon, eBay, Yahoo, we had many different attempts before ultimately I made the investment in Alibaba, that every one of those bought a local company with local employees who understood local culture, because it's very difficult to do it, to understand the laws, to understand the differences in privacy in Germany versus privacy in the US, very different issues. In the case of Chegg, it was very difficult for us to think outside the US simply because the cost to buy textbooks. We have over $100 million in inventory. We've raised a lot of money all to buy the textbooks. And we couldn't afford to do that in every country, get the warehousing set up, all those different things. However, since obviously it's all moving to digital, we are seeing, and we do plan to more aggressively go with our digital services, and we have now, we have 5 digital services that are increasingly internationalized. So we just bought a company called Student of Fortune, which is an egalitarian marketplace of students helping students, where the students keep the majority of the money. And fortunately, the kid who created it was 14 when he went to college, so he's a brainiac, and he personally translated into Japanese just because we asked him to, in case we needed to have an international commerce site discussion. So.
Yeah, okay. In case you want to make the rest of us feel unproductive for the day. Paul, what about Ideeli?
Well, We are solely focused today on the U.S. market, and for two reasons. One is that there aren't very many examples, frankly, of companies that have been able to have a global strategy in e-commerce, or in retail for that matter. Not a lot. I mean, it's very, very challenging. And I think, but the more important reason is the market opportunity in the U.S. is enormous. The categories we're in, which is fashion and home, and all the components of fashion, apparel, accessories, jewelry, and so on, are $600 billion a year in the U.S. And these markets are in the retail space in particular, there's enormous disruption going on. Fundamental change in how consumers are perceiving value, a fundamental change in how consumers want to shop. Moving away from very, very complicated shopping games where it's very, very difficult to figure out if you have the coupon and just can't keep track, to an emotional, very entertaining shopping experience. So, and we're seeing that, and that's not just in e-commerce. In general, this is the major, major shift, and you see models like Lululemon and others emerging with these new ways to think about shopping, and are taking enormous share from sort of a lot of the traditional retailers. So we see that. The other thing is, within the categories we're in, the penetration in e-commerce relative to the penetration of other big consumer categories is far lower. So across that $600 billion worth of categories, penetration somewhere between 4 and 8%, 10%. When you compare that to penetration for, let's say, books at 40%, electronics at 30 to 40%. So there's this enormous shift, and a lot of tailwind in terms of not only new types of shopping experiences, and we've sort of landed in the middle of that, and using analytics, we're helping to figure out how to innovate very rapidly there, but also just the U.S. e-commerce market. So we're focused there. I think, not dissimilar to what Gilt is doing, we think there's a huge opportunity to be able to actually fulfill from here, and then we'll see how we do over time.
So the U.S. market is still one of huge opportunity, it sounds like. I hope everyone's listening to what these guys think they're doing. But Michael, I wanted to ask too, we were talking a little bit about disruptors. And when we're talking about the upcoming holiday season, so important traditionally for retail, what changes, Iconoculture, of course, being a consumer research firm, what changes in consumer habits and shopping habits are you seeing, and what do you expect, if anything, maybe sort of the broader period of economic malaise that we're in the middle of? How do you expect it to kind of accelerate some of the changes, the use that consumers make of some of the opportunities that they can with these e-commerce sites?
Well, my Christmas predictions for China are very robust. No, let me put my global retail team hat on for a second and talk about something serious with respect to e-commerce and the trends we're seeing around unseasonal shopping. The sort of behaviors in the U.S. that we have seen consumers adopt have really tight budget, very thrifty, they're very sought after to be savvy though at the same time, which benefits the info things over here. But what we're seeing is people unseasonally shopping for holidays, and they started shopping right at the end of year sales last year in 2010, the last week of December. And that's continued on through the first 9 months of this year. And we already, if you ask questions to consumers about if they've already started for shopping for the holiday season, the answer is yes. If you ask them where they're going to shop, they're going to tell you online, especially with wish list management and other helpful things like that. And what we sort of are watching very closely is the sort of traditional retailer calendar of Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and how relevant that is going to be, maybe still this year, but going forward, I think we're going to see an erosion of Cyber Monday in terms of the importance to the consumer. Black Friday probably very still important for foot traffic. There's nothing else happening that day in our society. We still like to socialize and start commemorating together with our families, but if that translates into consumption is another big open question mark, just given the other sort of spending behavior we're seeing.
Kevin, what do you have planned, if anything, around days like Cyber Monday, Black Friday? Are you looking at that as a potential to increase penetration?
Yeah, it's, first of all, the flash sale sites are a little bit traditionally less gift-oriented. It's people buying for themselves. They're starting to buy gifts, but we're not as seasonal as a group as a typical site or a flowers site or something, which is hugely seasonal. But yeah, we make sure we have great sales during that time. We make sure that there's a lot of gift-oriented things. We make sure that that's present. We will have certain promotions to encourage people to come at that time. So more along those lines. It won't be dramatically different.
Yeah, and Dan, I want to comment here. This is, I
Our
realize,
seasons are not Christmas. They're
far outside your wheelhouse. But actually, let's hold that thought then for when we talk. I want to talk in a minute about Asia in particular. But Paul, if you want to comment first on the changing holiday shopping season.
Well, we too have a number of events tied around that. One of the main reasons we do that, though, is because so much of shopping is habit-based. And people have expectations about what they should be doing at different times. One of the things that's been actually extraordinary about the growth of the flash sale space is collectively we've created sort of this appointment-based shopping where people, it's noon. Noon means before I get my sandwich out, I want to go look. Or a preview, actually, you come in earlier. You can do that on Ideeli. So, we've changed around, how people think about how they're going to shop, and then it's built into a habit. And so much of, which is very difficult to do, by the way. This is not something that, you can sort of wave the magic wand. We're standing on the shoulders of others who originally did some of this work. But if you start to think that way, we see this. We actually we'll get a bump that day and so on because people are thinking maybe that's what I should be doing. But we're always trying to find those little blips where we can start to build on that and start to reinforce certain types of behavior to get them into habits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think one of the things that the flash sale sites sort of really play into is the value that consumers place on scarcity these days. Individuality, something that's authentic to me, something that I'm going to see everybody else wearing. Not that dominates their whole buying behavior, but you're benefiting from a channel shift, that's going on in terms of where they can find an outlet for that pursuit, and you're doing it very well. What we also wonder, though, is that people also now get used to seeing offers and opportunities to act on things every day throughout the year. And so they sort of hoard up the holiday their gift basket, if you will, and as long as nobody finds it in the closet, that's going to be a good strategy for them. So I think that's where we're at that point that I think you have a channel of disruption on your side that's feeding into a new behavioral desire because I can't consume the way I wanted to every single day in, day out. So flash sales, scarcity sales. We see a lot of different adoption of that across mainstream retailers too, in terms of I think it's factory from J. Crew. This is only open on the weekends, right? But I can give you a preview ahead of time, just as one example. And I think that's where that sort of there is a wider, I think, behavioral phenomenon happening about consumption. But I think you're in a sweet spot, for where that trend is heading.
One thing I wanted to ask about, and Dan, you guys probably have a lot of experience here, is that when we're talking about a lot of these sort of new companies, we're really talking about very old traditional systems of transportation and warehousing. And one particular concern with consumers when they're shopping on any of these kinds of sites or using, say, textbook rental services is how quickly can I get something? What happens if it's the wrong thing? What happens if I want to return it or if it's not what I expected? How do you guys handle that?
Yeah, that is when Ayush was our founded the company, that was a big issue for them. And they had no inventory and they were putting it on their personal credit cards or anybody's credit cards that worked in the office and then running out and buying it and shipping it any way they can ship it, which is the way all good startups start. I honestly, I think we're thinking about this the wrong way, which is this generation, they don't know any of those sort of rules or they don't think about it used to be done this way or that way. The fact of the matter is Chegg jumped from, I think, the number 3 textbook retailer this holiday, so this season, school season online. So kids have gotten past that because what they're really looking for is convenient. It's very convenient for them to buy it on their phone. I think we have 200,000 downloads for the iPhone app. You just take a picture of the ISBN. There are shipping options that everybody's comfortable with, 2 days, 4 days. But actually, Randy's husband, who I'm very fortunate to work with, convinced me of an idea that I thought was dead wrong and wouldn't matter, and of course he was dead right, which is what we can do with digital textbooks now is we've said we have all these digital textbooks, and if you want to pay $1.99 to get the first chapter while you're waiting for the book to arrive, you can do it. And what was shocking to me was that 30% of the time where we had that option available, somebody took it.
Wow.
What I loved, what I love the next generation of kids coming up is all of them went from the expensive shipping to ground shipping for free. So they figured out, I can get the chapter right now. I can pay $2 rather than $15. And we were ecstatic about it.
And what does that mean for you guys? I mean, how does that change your business model?
Well, it changed our business model in a way where, frankly, most of we subsidize shipping for the students. So the less expensive the shipping is, the better it is for us as a business. So it all works. The beautiful thing about technology is this generation has never known a day without the internet, without broadband, without an iPhone. I mean, we're on the iPhone 4, and I can't imagine people can remember a day without the iPhone, right? They all know TiVo, so they're all connected all the time. They never think twice about this stuff, and the key is give people what they want, when they want it, and how they want it. People always like discounts. They always like to be smart. They do take advantage of scarcity. But you know, the fact that anybody is not online communicating and transacting with their customer is the thing more shocking.
Yeah. And Kevin, I guess with textbooks, consumers or students don't really have a choice. They're told what to order. It's not the case with clothes, and it's certainly not one size fits all.
That's not true. My wife tells me what I have to order.
So how does a Gilt Group, for example, I'm sure for you guys, this ends up being a big part of how you manage your business.
In terms of the merchandise selection?
Returns, how quickly people can get items, and just the functions of shipping and receiving items that you've never tried on before and never actually seen in person.
Yeah, I think actually, I'm not sure if it was intentional, but it's true that the three of us all have a bricks and mortar type or infrastructure background that most e-commerce companies don't. Travel companies don't. It's all virtual. So it's a big challenge for everyone that takes a couple years and is a real critical advantage. And so it's one of the reasons that you see hundreds of competitors in the daily deal space, because it's very easy to sell discount coupons for a restaurant. When you're going to have a warehouse, our warehouse is 6 football fields size. It's enormous with robots floating around, and so that becomes a barrier to entry. So there's a couple companies that have done it, but not very many, and I think over time will be one of the big competitive advantages. But yeah, the number of things that can go wrong is enormous, and it's even worse in a flash sales business than probably any of your business, because whatever you guys sell in this room, most of what you sell today, you are selling the same item 2 months from now, and so you just figure it out, and it works. We are selling a completely different item, and every time, almost for the first time, we're selling a new brand or new item, and so the number of things that can go wrong between gourmet food, between surfboards, between carpets, between everything is enormous. There are moments where we couldn't find 2 years ago $1 million worth of stuff in the warehouse, and we had to decide whether it was part of it just never came in. We thought we got 1,000 shirts, but it was really 950, but our systems didn't pick that up. Part of it was that someone took the shirts who wasn't supposed to. Part of it was that they were actually in the warehouse, but no one could find them because they were hidden away. And part of it was that when a guy dropped it, he just dirtied it and threw it out. So it wasn't technically stolen, but not there. So everything goes wrong.
Michael, I worry sometimes we're headed to a future of warehouses and data centers. Can you reassure me that the shopping mall of the future won't just exist in my imagination or on my tablet?
It will be also in Chinese, right? So I think that's one of the real things to realize is that the bricks and mortar aspects of the logistics that these gentlemen are talking about is completely mandatory in terms of trying to reach and fulfill to any audience that you're trying to provide your goods to, and that is the biggest difference. So right now, I think just to make a China point here, in the B2C and C2C revolution in China. For e-commerce, I think we went from, I think it was 7,000 to 15,000 B2C sites, from like 2008 to 2010, and now we're going to clock up. We're close to 23,000, 24,000 this year. And really, but the top 3 sites dominate 92% of sales. So people seek out who they can trust, and that more and more is not the gee whiz aspects. It's really who gives me the right information, who gives me the right selection, who delivers on time, who makes it easy to do business with, who remembers that I was there. These things are sort of standard and global. So I joke about it being in Chinese language, which is important, but in terms of what they want, it's going to be the same. And if you have the ability to deliver that value, then you've got a leg up on whatever market you're choosing to go in through acquisition or otherwise.
One quick thing I'd add.
Go ahead.
At least we know that when we give it to UPS or FedEx, we're sort of done. It gets to the consumer. The 360 Buy, which is an Amazon equivalent in China, and Coupe VIP in Russia, which is a Gilt equivalent in Russia, they don't even have infrastructure systems that can do that. So they actually had to do their own delivery, door to door, and create that system. So they have 360 Buy, for example, which I'm not involved with, but it's an impressive company. They have, in Shanghai, they have 18 different small warehouses so that they can, and some large ones, so they actually have to set that up. It's like a whole UPS infrastructure in addition to their own back-end infrastructure. So that's not trivial.
And Paul, I'm curious, how much of your sort of day-to-day business is involved in managing just the flow of products back and forth and managing that relationship with customers, where it's not even so much getting them to buy something, but then dealing with that process after the point of sale?
Well, I'd say that every business, every growing business is a plate spinning exercise. You're getting these going. There's a lot of plates in this business, and I think Kevin's comments definitely resonate. Where it's just you have to get it right. I think what's happened in our space is because of the great value and the fact that we're touching so many of these dynamics that make it very, very compelling. The early stages we were able to get away with more in terms of having a little more difficulty in sort of getting a product there. I think in the next phase, as we go into the mainstream, frankly, consumers expect to get the same level of service that they get at the places they shop most frequently, which is Amazon and Zappos and so on. Now, whether or not you can offer free shipping and so on, that actually isn't so much the point as making sure expectations are met every time, and that's very difficult to do at scale when you're growing very, very rapidly. But that's what it's going to come to. If you're talking about the penetration within our space, but even again against e-commerce, people's expectations around how they expect to get something delivered. If you're going to reach the next. Let's see, there's probably, across the categories that we're in and across the, Kevin's business is much higher end and we're much more in the sort of the middle, the big middle, but, it's 90 million households, give or take. The amount of households that have been exposed to this point is, their customers is, far below 10 million. So we're very early on, but that big mainstream expects, they want great value, they want to make sure that they can return with no worry. They want to make sure that they, they want to have unrealistic expectations met. And so that's the bar. And I think what's interesting is why is it that certain levels of penetration are lower? It's just because the level of service is not there yet from people who are at scale to deliver it. It's basically people are waiting to buy that way, but the companies have to be ready to deliver it that way.
I'm curious too. Go ahead, yeah.
Add something to that, because some of the things that we learned were. We decided to take it all in-house, which was we could have gone to a virtual warehouse. We could have had it sent out by a whole bunch of people. We could have tapped into the different shipping systems. But Ayush and the team made a decision to brand the whole thing Chegg. So it comes in an orange box. It's an experience that we own. And that made an enormous difference. I think we're 6 times larger than any of our competitors who started around similar times because we owned that experience. Second thing is we have a 21-day return policy for any reason. Third is we got pretty smart about the fact that our entire audience is technologically savvy and there's no debate about it. And so we live on Twitter and Facebook, and I'll tell you what I mean by that, which is during our rush season, where we can do, a lot of transactions in a day, we monitor Twitter and Facebook feeds, and there is never a comment that is put up that is negative that isn't responded to and resolved in 5 minutes.
By you guys?
By
you
a
have
Chegg
dedicated
employee.
staff? Wow.
They monitor that line, they get it, they resolve it, and they become our best friends. So these things are achievable. So in our case, we invested more to create around that experience. We got a very generous return policy. And the other thing that we did, which is very different than any of the traditional retail channels that I was involved in, I spent a year running Guitar Hero, where you go through channels, you go through the store, you have no information. We know everything instantaneously. We can actually, we do our forecast in advance, and it is actually designed a 15-minute forecast all 24 hours. We know exactly where we're supposed to be, returns, net returns, a very data-centric business, a lot of algorithms in this stuff.
Wow.
Which is a real advantage of technology. But the number one thing that we did, which turned out to be really smart, was customer service. Every customer service call would come in, we would take the call, then we would research it, then we'd get back to them and talk about 3 calls, which is about $7 a call. So $21 for every student that was pissed off, just to turn out that they were right. Right? At the end of the day, we either got them the book on time or we didn't. So we reversed our policy, and we said, now when a student calls in or comes in through technologically, which we direct them, we say yes. And then we go back and research it later if we want to find out if they were wrong. Because it turned out historically 90% of the complaints were accurate. And so our brand recognition went up, our recommendations went up, our transactions went up, and we saved a fortune. We've had fewer calls, fewer responses, even though our volume has gone up significantly. We know which categories we're going to be in, and we just assume the student's right. And I think if you're going to be online and you're going to build a brand, you got to go all in, right? Otherwise, if you're a Groupon where you're offering a discount on something that you don't have, that's not from you, that someone else can offer the same discount on it, what's your value proposition other than an email list? So I think if you're going to be an e-commerce company, be one. Own the entire experience.
We are now going to open the conversation up to questions from the audience.
While you're thinking, let me just get Paul to come here real quick, and then we'll come.
In other words, she's not ready.
Just last word here, and then I promise we'll open it up.
Well, I think that actually brings up another really, really critical point, and why ultimately this is how it's all going to go, is the rate of innovation that's possible. If you use analytics and you're listening carefully, you can do it so much faster online. And that, I think even in the context of the space we're in, it's not going to look like this in 5 years, because we're going to be, same, very, very analytics driven. We're listening carefully, and we're making these changes and test. Basically, at this point, the way these meetings go, and I'm sure this is true for my counterparts here, somebody comes in, has an idea, we're like, great, let's test it. My experience says that this, it's like, who knows? If you can test it quickly, test it, and then what you end up is a series of incremental changes that really, really move the dial, and that's been really critical for our success.
Yeah, and by the way, at the scale, once you get at scale, those changes, we rebuilt our entire system, our algorithms, our pricing mechanisms, so we can change the price of a single book at a single school, or every book, or books that we own or books that we outsource to, and we can do it across the entire catalog. Within 1 hour, everything can be changed if we wanted to. So we never go past an hour without being able to adjust it.
It's a little bit different time scale than I think your typical retailer has. But with that, let's open it up to questions. Are these, right here? And could you identify yourself asking the question?
Dan, I just wanted, if you give an example, you said you use social media to monitor customer service issues. Can you give an example of the kind of things that you see there and what the make goods are? And then sort of the second question is, how did you implement that whole process company-wide? Like what's the escalation process? Who gets to answer those questions? What's the voice? Those kind of technical issues.
Yeah, I think Randy alluded to it earlier, which is at a startup company, you empower everybody. And so we took a position that the customer's right. And so therefore, you will get in more trouble spending a lot of time trying to figure out why the customer's wrong than just assuming they're right. Because the semester starts, they need that book. It's important to them. The fact that they order it late, that's our problem, not theirs. And so we took that customer-first philosophy. We changed the name of customer service to Student Advocacy Group. We retrained everybody. I personally listen into phone calls and have spent a lot of time on the training. And on the social media, it really happened by accident, which is I think all of us, I know Kevin for a long time, we don't sleep very much. And so if you can sneak the iPad in, and I'm looking at reports by the minute, and if I see what actually happened was, it was about 3 o'clock in the morning, and I saw a real dip in the site, and I got nervous, and so I was like, do I call my head of engineer? What if I wake up his wife? She's going to be pissed at me, and I like her. And so what I did instead was I went to Facebook and I went to Twitter to see whether or not our customers could tell me what was wrong. Was the site not working? And so the next day I came in and I was like, look, this is where they live. So we got to live where they live. And get on it. And we assigned a certain number of people. We estimated the number of calls. We assigned a certain number of people. And they solved the problem instantly. And by the way, you could not imagine a more happy group of employees that feel empowered to say yes to a customer and give them what they want. And you ask what kind of make goods. We've comped people all of their books. So if one didn't come and they ordered 5 from us, we've said, sorry, they're all free. Just tell your friends if you like us. And it was a big investment up front. And Ayush really pushed me on this because he's like, this is the most vocal crowd in the world. You piss them off, we're done. I mean, we literally could go out of business overnight. So we went the other way.
Just to add to that, so we have, one time, let's say 40 people in customer support, there are always going to be about 2 or 3 that are assigned to Twitter and Facebook. So you're monitoring that all the time. It's just another assignment within that. The test I would do for all of you is, and I do it too, but just go online and just tweet, I bought something from whatever your company is, and I love it. And if you guys are doing your job, someone from customer support, even though it's not negative, it's positive, will be on that and say, like in Gilt's case, they should say, I'm sure you're going to look great in that dress tonight, or whatever it is. So there's a dialogue happening. And if it's negative, same thing.
I have to admit, upset me because I bought a suit.
So but people need to be on and do it for your competitors as well to see if who's doing it well and who's not doing it well.
Dan, real quick, I'm curious, how many employees does Chegg have?
Depends on the day. We've acquired 5 companies in 12 months. But I think now we're up to about 350. When I got there, I think we were at 180, so I've been there about 16 months.
Right, or Kevin, what about you?
We have 850 plus 200 that are in the warehouse that are coming on board, so we'll be 1,000 by January.
And Paul?
280.
280. Just curious, because it seems to me that generally speaking, your businesses are much less labor intensive than a traditional retailer. And I'm curious if that's part of the advantage, or if it's just a different structure altogether where you're just outsourcing more pieces of the business.
I can tell you from my standpoint, having spent a year trying to go through channels with Guitar Hero, the real leverage of this business is the data. It's a direct relationship with your consumer. It's your ability to, we use Omniture, we A/B test every single thing that we do. We don't have to debate, as you said. It's not a matter of, as my mentor Bill Campbell says, I don't really give a crap about your gut. What do the facts tell us? And so we can predict if we change the price what's going to happen to sales, what's going to happen to returns. So we run it like it's a data business. We could be marketing anything. It just happens to be textbooks.
Other questions? Over back there, yes? And if you could identify yourself.
Hi, Suchit Majmudar from Charming Charlie. It's a question for Kevin and Paul. Kevin, you guys launched Park and Bond, which is more of a traditional e-commerce site. Just wondering a little bit more about the strategic intent behind doing that in the context of a flash sale business. And Paul, whether you have any intent to go into a more traditional e-commerce business.
So our strategy is overall is relatively simple, which is just I want to sell more things to the same people. And so that's why first we went from women's to home to men's to kids to travel to restaurants, because these are all the same customers buying more of the same things. And that extended to full price as well. So we had a lot of men in particular coming to us and saying, I went in to get a linen shirt from you and you ran out, which is part of your model, but now do I go to another site to get a linen shirt? If you had one right there, I would buy it. And so we did a bunch of tests, put full price shirts up, and they sold out. So tons of people bought them. So it's really just selling more things to the same people. And there's different use cases. So travel, sometimes flash sales is great if you want to go anywhere in the Caribbean and can selectively choose. Sometimes call up and say, look, I need to go to the Bahamas. I have a wedding. So I need hotels in the Bahamas. I like Jet Setter, so let me use that. So yeah, it's a big part across the board of our strategy. And so next year, it won't be a huge part of the business, but we'll do $100 million next year in full price. And 9 months ago, we didn't have any.
Wow.
So it's not insignificant.
Paul?
Well, I think our approach is a little different in that we think that the opportunity to deliver value, remarkable value, worth telling your friend about, is really a critical component of our value proposition. Now that's, sometimes something at full price, such as it is a great value. So we have, within our frame, we want to make sure that anybody who comes into Ideeli, for whatever we're offering, goes, wow, that's really a great deal, great value. Discount actually ultimately has less to do with it, because discount as an idea, I think, is beginning to frankly fade. I mean, it's, the models that are winning are all these models where it's very, very easy for the consumer to know that they're going to get a good value at that place. In the four walls of Costco, at Walmart, these models are built around the fact that you walk in and there's no surprises in there when it comes to value. So we're really focused around that. We also believe that the unit economics on that business, and particularly where we're positioned, which is much more at the sort of aspirational and mass affluent bucket, as opposed to more of the high end, is enormous opportunity. So we're trying to do that really, really well and clean up all of these edges to make sure that we can offer spectacular service and own that. And over time we'll add things to that, but we really want to be able to do that right.
I'm curious, Michael, on this point, when companies are looking to China, to that huge emerging consumer base, is it really the discount model that needs to be a focus, or is it just access to a lot of these new kinds of websites, new kinds of experiences that ultimately are the opportunity?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, I would say it's emerged. So let's stop talking about it being an emerging market. You got 300 million, 200 million, 250 million middle class consumers. 87 million mass affluents. I mean, it's there. And I think to the point that was made about buying in through acquisition, is something to, make sure you keep in the back of your mind. But it's not this discount-driven environment. What people are looking for there is, as choice, access to choice as fast as possible. And in fact, e-commerce is in an advantaged position in China because it can build out faster than physical store can. So, in China, you've got 288 cities. You're going to have over 1 million people in population by 2025. Can you roll out your stores that fast? I don't think so. But your distribution system and your e-commerce site can. And the Chinese are already using it. So if you're not there, you're missing opportunity. And what I want to focus on is to say what they want is that access to choice as fast as possible, but then they want authentic selection. They want to find selection that helps them reflect who they want to be as individuals and authentic self. So it's not a mass environment in China. You have tons of individualistic pursuits in that country, and with all the freedoms that are available within an economic or consumer pursuit sphere, they're going to act on that and try to reflect their new self. And I think that is where the challenge comes into providing that seamless experience all the way to the box that's delivered at the door. And you've talked about it from actually making sure the integrity of your box gets there okay, the fact that how it's going to get there, in a place like China, the demand is there, right? It's just that the delivery is really hard. And it's all going to happen in another language that you don't know and using other social media tools that you don't know. And that's really where the challenge is. I think you're experts at the sort of logistical operations, but just translating that into meeting the consumer demand is not about just a good price.
Right.
It's really about the full value experience. Please.
Add on China is that everyone always says, to almost every internet company, startup, if you're successful, why don't you go to China? It's a huge market. And I actually, not everyone will agree with this, I always tell people that you probably shouldn't go to China. You can't win as an American, as a U.S. company, consumer brand, you will not win in China.
Why do I feel like that's going to be a contentious thing to assert?
Yeah, so this is different than if you're Procter & Gamble and you have a brand, will people buy Procter & Gamble because they can't copy that themselves? That's different. I'm talking about it's the one market where if you're Amazon, if you're Google, if you're Yahoo, if you're eBay, not surprisingly, all have lost. And you'll lose for one of two reasons. Generally on the merits, you'll lose because there'll be a Chinese company that's just better and faster and more aggressive. And if for some reason that doesn't happen, the system will structure itself in a way, legally or illegally, that you will not win.
Michael, you want to comment on that real quick?
Well, I think there's definitely a huge challenge for sort of strong flattery in China with regards to e-commerce replication. But I think when you talk about it just from a brand perspective that's selling through e-commerce, we don't care like what channel wins as long as there's a dominant channel. But I think what's important is how you choose to communicate your brand through that. And to that extent, I feel like all the social media platforms, we'll hear from Burberry in just a little bit, and the extent to which they go to engaging socially. It's not like they're in every, all 100 top cities. It's not like they don't drop ship from overseas. They just fulfill a brand promise, and they deliver that both socially and through e-commerce. And I think whether you want to do a single brand concept like that is a very challenging thing, but to recognize that you can sell through the channels that exist to a ready audience, but you have to really be able to communicate robustly, and I think fearlessly, as sort of one of the themes that's gone through all these panels, is like you have to be able to have that two-way communication, and it's very vibrant in China.
By
be
the way,
ready.
you've talked about China a lot, and when I was at Yahoo, we had a tremendous amount of experience failing exactly as you described, and occasionally finding ourselves sitting across from the Chinese government with our employees on the other side. And so ultimately it led to us doing the Alibaba deal, which is a very successful financial transaction. But you've been talking about Asia a lot. I think the hot market right now seems like Latin America, particularly Brazil, seems like one of the hottest markets for e-commerce, and everybody is going in there. So, it's there. I would just encourage people to start much more mobile-centric. It's a much more mobile-centric environment, but it is very hot right now. The economy is very hot. Amazon is moving in there. Just about every company that I know is setting up shop there, and much more friendly to U.S. companies.
Turkey, great market. Poland. There are lots of what we'd call markets outside of Europe that are really promising in the internet space, and many local competitors doing well, and many international companies doing well. So incredible potential.
Yeah. Other questions? Yep, over here.
Dave Carlson from GetCo. Kevin, you'll be happy to know we're not expanding into China right now. This question is for both Dan and Kevin. I was kind of fascinated by how you were talking about using digital media for customer advocacy and customer support. Do you also use digital media for quality control? The same way brick and mortar stores send in Go shoppers to test quality and customer service issues at the point of sale. I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
Do we use it for quality control to make sure our own company works well? Without a doubt. First of all, every one of our employees has to use our site and try it. I learned a valuable lesson, which is, to start up, there are no corporate credit cards, so we literally had to give people cash to go to go get a debit card to go buy textbooks because they're expensive. But yeah, no, all of our executives spend all of their time on all of our products and services. And by the way, living in Silicon Valley, so does our board of directors. And in my case, my daughter is, I went through the exact process that all Chegg customers go through. She's 18 and she's a college freshman this year. And so she does a lot of work for me. In fact, I was up there visiting her this weekend and putting all of her friends on the different products and services to get their feedback. So we all use them ourselves. However, since most of our services are for and around college-related kids, we really do engage with our customers in person as well. We do once a month, we do quals at college and universities all over the country, and then we oftentimes throw them a concert afterwards, put a big concert on their campus to say thank you. And every business that we bought, frankly, was a student-to-student business, started by a student, including Ayush, who started ours, who the name came up chicken and egg, which is you can't get a job without an education. You can't get an education without having a job to pay for it. So it was a chicken and egg situation. So we also hire about 14 to 18 college interns that work for us sort of year-round on different projects. So we're all over it.
Just one thing to add to that I put everyone in the company through a day of customer support training so that every single person has spent hours on the phone with someone by their side to help them because they're not fully trained yet, but to answer calls, and everyone found it a very fulfilling experience.
Well, thank you all very much. I hope that was useful. It was certainly useful to me, so thank you.